Welcome back, viewers and listeners, to another episode of Across the Pond podcast with myself, Lindsey Stroud, and Martin Culliff. We're both fellows at the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. And today we've got a very special guest on it that we know very well. I think that Martin's known him a little bit longer. We've got Tim Andrews or Timothy Andrews. Which one do you prefer?
We can go with Tim.
Okay, we'll go with Tim. Okay, so Tim is the Director of Consumer Issues at the Americans for Tax Reform and the Tholos Foundation. And prior to coming over to across this side of the pond, he was the president of the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, as well as the founder of Australia Legalized Vaping Campaign, which is well, we'll talk more about what's going on there. So, and he's done awesome work. I know ATR did a really good We Vape, We Vote bus tour back in 2022 that TPA was a little bit involved with. And Tim was also a good cop expert and really helped us out a lot. So thank you for coming on, Tim. And can you kind of explain to our viewers, a little bit more about you?
Well, look, thank you so much for having me on, and it's great to connect with you as always, Martin and Lindsey. I think, Martin, we've known each other for more than 15 years now in this.
I think that's about right. Yeah, I was just saying about that to Lindsey. I think met you in London one time when you were still based in Australia, didn't I think?
Yes,
yeah.
when I found you from your blog and reached out as a huge fan and wanted to catch up with you. So
that's right. God, them days.
Good day. So yeah, can you tell us more a little bit, I guess, what you're working on at Americans for Tax Reform? Why you guys even care about vaping, I guess, is usually what we always get at TPA. So
sure. So, I mean, Americans for Tax Reform has been around since the 1980s and it was founded at the request of President Reagan to try and advocate for taxpayers and consumers to reduce the tax burden. A lot of what we do is trying to expand and build on coalitions of people who just want the government to leave us alone. So why did we get interested in the vaping issue? And ATR has been working on this for years before even I joined. And it's twofold. First of all, it's the morally right thing to do. Taxes and regulations on vapors hurt people who want to quit smoking through reduced risk alternatives to combustible tobacco. So this is a moral question. And as part of the morality, it's also a freedom of choice question. So if people want to choose these products, they should have the right as individuals to be able to do this. But not only is it the right thing to do, it's also the politically correct thing to do. The politically smart thing to do, because vapors are a huge political constituency in the United States. There are now probably over 20 million vapors in the United States who have used these products to either quit or reduce their smoking. And these are people who base their votes on it. So if you want to try and build the Leave Us Alone coalition, trying to get more people in the room who want the government to leave them alone, then this is a constituency. And they do get out and vote. We had one Senate campaign in Wisconsin where Senator Ron Johnson on election night basically attributed his victory to mobilizing the vaping vote. So we've done other polling in the United States where the number of vapors who will say this is their number one vote-moving issue is bigger than the margin of victory. And of course it's a vote-moving issue. If you've got a product that has saved your life and you'll want the government to not ban you from using it. So we're trying to expand the coalition of people who believe in individual rights and individual freedom for politically pragmatic reasons, as well as the morality and the choice arguments as a result. So that's the domestic work from Americans for Tax Reform. And the Tholos Foundation is our international arm. So it's affiliated with Americans for Tax Reform. And it was named after the Tholos in Athenian Greece, so in ancient Greece. Now, the Tholos is just a building, style of building. But in Athens, it was the building where, after meetings of the Athenian Senate, basically politicians, people from business, citizens would all get together and talk. And because we're about breaking those sort of silos and building those relationships between people in politics, consumers and businesses, we sort of named it after the first prototype of these sorts of coalition meetings. And we actually run coalition meetings in about 20 countries all over the world. We've got about 50 in the United States. I think we've actually got like 53 meetings in 47 states, because some states like Florida have 5 meetings. But it's very much about building those coalitions. And we think that people who vape are an important part of the Leave Us Alone coalition.
Yeah, fantastic. And you guys do more than vape, right? It's all tobacco harm reduction. So oral nicotine, all of for our viewers who might not be aware of, all of the plethora of options that are less harmful alternatives to smoking.
And different products work for different people. For some people, it's nicotine pouches. For some people, it's snus. For some people, it's heat not burn. So we've looked at things like just in Japan, where heat not burn have in a couple of years led smoking rates to fall by 50%. In Sweden, snus has let people, now it's effectively a smoke-free country, 5% of the population smoke. So there's no one-size-fits-all model. And this is the problem that a lot of other people don't seem to think. They think, oh, well, we'll just do this one-size-fits-all prescription model, use this, quit this. If it's not abstinence zone, quit this way. Whereas we're all about choice, because different things work with different people, different things work in different countries with different cultures. The more choice, freedom, and flexibility consumers have, the better.
So you've been doing internet.
I'd like to ask you, why is it that public health are the only people in the world who seem to think that prohibition works? Simple question.
And the irony is that public health in other spheres don't. Like if you look at harm reduction in sort of opioid use, drug use, those sorts of things, they've generally embraced harm reduction rather than prohibition. But the problem is that the public health experts in tobacco have dedicated 20, 30 years to just prohibition because all of their alternatives have failed. Higher taxes have failed. Plain packaging, abject failure. Graphic health warnings, failure. Every single government-run, centralized, state-mandated policy has failed. And here the free market came up with a product that consumers want, and they didn't think of it. And I think this drives them nuts. And so they have this psychological issue that blocks them from accepting evidence and reality.
What would you say? Yeah, I noticed with Canada, they really embrace harm reduction when it comes to opioids, and actually their public health is a little bit better than American public health as far as effectively conveying the risk of e-cigarettes and letting the people know that it's less harmful. In your opinion, what would you say are some of the best countries when it comes to accessing tobacco harm reduction? And I guess what are some of the worst? And I guess advice that you would have for people in those countries, either the good or the bad, because we know, as we're seeing with the UK, it can't always be, things can move fast.
I think we're seeing a lot of good things in New Zealand. The New Zealand government has a very proactive policy in terms of promoting harm reduction, both under the old government and under the new government. You go to the official sort of health websites and the data is very, very clear that, if you can't quit smoking through abstinence only or other methods which are less effective, then this is a good model. So I think New Zealand is a good model. And it was interesting how the impact of smoking rates on the Maori population was really what triggered it. Because you have people from generally socioeconomically disadvantaged groups, and that was what really drove it in New Zealand. The UK is still better than most countries. It's sort of sliding back, unfortunately, which is, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and we can never take things for granted. But comparing, the US, the EU is sort of middle of the ground, where there's still a lot more freedom than in countries such as the United States from a legislative perspective, but it's going in the wrong direction. And probably the worst country of those, of sort of the Western countries, would be Australia, which has doubled down on prohibition and it's failed, and it's doubled down on prohibition and it's failed, and it's doubled down on prohibition again and it's failed. And how many times can you keep failing before you realize, hang on, we've got something wrong? It's such an unsustainable policy that's led to this incredible situation. We've got well over a million vapers in Australia who are criminals, who can technically face, in some states, jail time just for having a nicotine vape. You've got an incredibly large black market, which has now led to fire bombings and murders. There have been at least, the tobacco and vaping gang wars have led to, I think, a couple of assassinations last year. I think it's something like 80 shops have been firebombed and arson attacks. And this is Australia. You don't really think of Australia as having a gangland criminal war. And it's not even about hard drugs. If you think about gang wars, you would think about, Mexican drug cartels and things, smuggling, getting in gang wars over hard drugs. It's over vapes and tobacco in Australia. Like, this is policy insanity. And the government just refuses to recognize reality. And they keep saying, oh, we'll just prohibit harder, when you can get illicit vapes pretty much anywhere. And it's run by these international criminal syndicates. And it's just if you want to look at a country that's got everything wrong about tobacco policy, look at Australia. When tobacco smoking rates generally haven't fallen compared to other countries. It's got the highest tax rates in the world. If you're a low-income earner, you can be you're potentially spending more than half of your salary on cigarettes if you can't keep smoking. The illicit market is through the roof. Like, there is nothing that has worked about Australia's approach.
I look at Australia, and I'm sorry, Tim, I know it's your home country, but I find it difficult not to laugh. You know, it's horrible for people who live in Australia, but you know, I regularly call it clown country because it is so laughable, this policy. I mean, there was a few years ago, there was an advocate, a consumer advocate in Australia, rang up Australian Border Force, and said, is this true that tourists coming over are not allowed to bring their vapes through the border? And they said, yeah, that's correct. And this what's going to happen to them, you know, especially from the UK, where the NHS is encouraging people to use vaping products. And they said, well, we'll confiscate them. They can have them on the way out when they go back. And she said, well, what are they going to do when they're in Australia? He said, oh, it's fine. You can buy cigarettes on any street corner. And you think, I mean, this is just madness, isn't it?
Yes. It's as I say, it's clown country. It's and the problem is that public health is so well funded by taxpayer funds that their message just gets out everywhere, and it's just sort of wall-to-wall saturation with messages from taxpayer-funded so-called public health. And I really don't even want to call them public health campaigns, because they're not about public health. Like, this is it's Orwellian doublespeak to call them public health when there is nothing pro-health about what they're doing.
I call them public health trade associations, okay? We should know exactly what they really are. And I think that's always amazing too. I mean, we're in the States, and I mean, all of our products is, you know, the majority of all of, probably 99.9% of the vapes being used among Americans are illegal products. They're not FDA authorized. And you're just seeing some amazing, you know, substance abuse, SAM, HSA, or whatever. I don't know the exact acronym on this. They just did the numbers on it, and like there was an increase of adults vaping. It's 26.6 million Americans 12 or over, and even underage use went down from 2022 to 2023. So these are adults, and then it's correlating with this significant decline in cigarette sales. I know British American Tobacco reported in their second quarter a 10% reduction, or Altria reported a 13% reduction. Those numbers might be crisscrossed or whatnot, but I mean, I think it's amazing. And it's, do you ever think in the United States that the FDA is ever going to get behind flavored vaping and how they're going to rectify the situation where you have now, you know, states kind of going after, you know, enforcing their actions, and, you know, but you're still having adults, you know, wanting these products?
The problem is that at the moment, FDA places politics and ideology above their mission to protect public health. So they're taking actions which are completely inappropriate for the protection of public health because of political reasons and political pressure. I think that, I mean, we saw very, very clearly when the FDA chair was appointed that Senator Blumenthal, basically for his confirmation, said proudly that he made a contingent of him not authorizing or taking a hard line against these alternatives. So you have so much political pressure from politicians who don't know a thing about public health to do this. So I think that if there is a different administration and there is a different political incentives, and the FDA is fundamentally reformed, and I think it needs, the Centre for Tobacco Control needs root and branch reform, then, I mean, it's possible that they may once again put science and evidence at the centre of their mission. But unless there's political change, and this is one of the reasons why we keep talking about the politics of it and not just the morality, because unfortunately, as much as I would love politicians to do the right thing because it's the right thing, they're much more likely to do the right thing if they think it's going to get them re-elected, right? That's just political reality. So, with a few sort of brave and notable exceptions, but That's what I think is necessary. I don't think absent political change, we'll see regulatory change. Which is
Yeah,
why,
I'm
Can I ask
saying,
you,
which is why
can
we
I
need
ask you about, sorry, go on. Sorry, carry on, Lindsay. Hang on.
go ahead. It's fine.
No, I thought, it's while we got you on and talking about America, I think we're going to have to talk about this Zyn thing, nicotine pouches, which is a big story all over the world. We're watching America and seeing it play out. I'm fascinated in how this is turning into almost a Republican Democrat shift with these products, where Republicans have taken on. Do you think that this Zyn product, because it's become so popular and there's a big sort of like cultural thing about it, do you think this could be a totem for freedom of choice in America, where they take this on and saying, people are saying, take Zyn out of my cold dead hands or something? Could this be actually something good for America and for freedom of choice if this is the way they're thinking?
I think that, if you have a look at just the number of people on social media, etc., have made this as part of their identity, and looking at the science behind it, nicotine pouches are as close to harmless as you can get. Their toxicological reports, they have fewer chemicals in the nicotine gums, which are prescribed by doctors and are on the WHO's lists of essential medicines. Like, these are products that are essentially pure caffeine. Pure nicotine, which we know isn't actually more harmful than caffeine. No one actually really disputes it. So there's no scientific argument against them. It's products that there's so much evidence about. Like, you can argue that the longitudinal studies on vaping have only been for 10 years. That's not enough. But for oral products, we've got like 40, 50 years of data if you include snus and those sorts of things. So there's not even a shred of scientific debate. Like, you can't even, the argument against e-cigarettes is a really, really bad argument, but there isn't even an argument to be made against these sort of pouches. And looking at just how consumers enjoy using these products, they think it benefits them. It benefits them for a number of reasons, and we do know that there are positive benefits to these products. Again, the science there isn't disputed. So I think this could be a real opportunity, and I think something we're going to focus on more is not just talking about the We Vape, We Vote, but the We Zyn, We Vote, We Zyn, We Vote. And it's a little bit more catchy than We Zyn, We Vote, but getting the Zyn people to use things, I think, is the next big political thing.
I think we're going to have a massive amount of counterfeit products. I know that they're already seeing it now, with especially the pouches, and I think that that's not really emphasized enough. I always go back to Juul, back in the vitriol against Juul back in 2018, and a lot of them, the kids were juuling. Well, no, a lot of the kids were using Eon Smoke, which was a kind of a cheaper version of Juul, had way more flavors on it. And now when you're looking at like these disposables in the States, they're all technically illegal. One of the big popular brands like Elf Bar proper quit, selling it. But if you go to any gas station, you see Elf Bars. I always tell everybody that I'm seeing on the street that, like, that's not real. that's not legitimate and everything. Obviously, yeah, this prohibition model isn't working. That's where I do think that we're going to get some point. I think Zyn personally, I think oral nicotine is going to really kind of put more scrutiny on the Tobacco Control Act and just how difficult it is to bring a safer product to market. But we could bring cigarettes.
Oh, of course, yeah. You're absolutely spot on.
Yeah. I guess, okay, we have to talk about the World Health Organization and, Good Cop that we hosted. And for people who aren't aware, the World Health Organization has a framework convention on tobacco control where they've got 180 countries that pretty much get together every 2 years to try to take down tobacco. Is pretty much the gist on of it. We know COP11 will be happening in November in Geneva next year. What do you think that they're going to do, and what do you think that we should expect from the WHO and specifically Michael Bloomberg and all of his organizations, because he's the one who pretty much runs that show?
The World Health Organization is not a health organization. We have seen throughout, and not even on this issue, over the last 10 years, 15 years, they have a litany of failure and of death and destruction that they have left in their wake. Everything they touch, they screw up. What they did with Ebola was absolutely a debacle. What they did, and the stories from there are horrific. What they did, their COVID responses were miserable, and how they bungled everything. It is the touch of death to have the WHO, literally not figuratively, associated with anything, because they are a political organization with an agenda and have nothing to do with health. Now, when they were founded, it was very, very different. But they're not a health body anymore. And unfortunately, in this particular sphere, they've sold their souls to get money from Michael Bloomberg to promote policies that keep people smoking and stop them from quitting to reduce risk alternatives. And I don't think that is going to change, because why would it? They're getting money. They have their luxury conferences. They get their junkets. They get to send delegates to have a very, very expensive, nice time paid for by Bloomberg and by our taxes. So what is their incentive to change? The incentive. I was hopeful that after people woke up to their bungling over COVID, that people would actually wake up to how rotten the organization is. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. But I think that we're not going to see anything positive come out of the next COP. I think that that's why it's important to have the alternative with actual scientists and actual evidence out there commenting the misinformation and the fake news that they are promoting. Because they are, if you look at, look at their Twitter feed and how it always gets community noted, because they lie. Like, this isn't a question of opinion. It's one thing to say, you know, the evidence is if they said the evidence on e-cigarettes is uncertain, I would disagree, but all right, maybe. They just blatantly make things up, and they just lie through their teeth about things that there's no link to reality whatsoever. And they lie and they lie and they lie. And I don't think
I'm glad you said that, because did you see the tweet? I think it was in June, where the WHO, it wasn't even one of the branches of the WHO, it was the WHO itself described vaping products as designed to kill. I mean, this is an organization that's completely lost its way, isn't it? I mean, you know, the thing I think about COP11, it's a home match for them. It's a home fixture. It's in their backyard. They're going to have all their health attaches there and everything. So, you know, the TPA, we're going to be doing Good Cop again, 2.0. You were at the first one, Tim, and we hope you'll come along again. But we're the away side. We're going into their backyard. But it'd be interesting to see what they come out with, because I think the last COP, I think you might agree with, it was a bit of a damp squib for them, wasn't it? They didn't get anything done they wanted to.
That's true. And there are some good countries still who try and block some of the worst things, because I think because of the consensus model, they do actually need to get consensus. And there are some countries who actually believe in science and evidence and those sorts of things that you would have hoped more than like 5 countries supported. And it would be nice to have greater transparency at these sorts of things as well. Like, I think people would be horrified if they knew what their tax dollars was being spent on. And as we know, they don't allow outside observers, they don't allow media, they don't allow people to observe their things. So it's really, really good to have something like Good Cop to be able to show the world what they're up to and how this conflicts with what actually pro-health international organizations should be doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we're on their radar. I know that they're not happy with us, and we're coming back next year, and it's going to be even better. I know that for a fact. We're way more prepared this time. And hopefully they won't cancel it again. So, well, I guess we're down to our last, question, I guess. And I always, we always try to keep it upbeat and, positive. So, you got any final thoughts, words of inspiration for all of our viewers?
Oh, absolutely. Harm reduction is on the right side of history. They are promoting, prohibition has failed consistently. I mean, look at alcohol prohibition. And it was like prohibition in the United States was overturned. It took a while. There was a lot of deaths in the meantime. There was criminals. There was, but it was overturned. So I absolutely am positive that in the long term, truth will win. It's just a question of how long it will take. And I know it sometimes can get a little bit disheartening to sort of think about what's happening negative in the short term. But in the long term, I think generally truth wins out. And so I'm feeling positive that, when I'm having a conversation with Martin and we say, my God, we've known each other for 30 years rather than 15, that we'll be in a much better. And I was just telling you, Lindsey, I've known you for 15 years, but it will be, we'll be in a much better place.
Absolutely. That's a good
Can
way
I
to
just add
end.
one little thing to that? One thing you said right at the start, Tim, about this is a vote moving issue. And I bore people with this, but I always tell consumers, you are extremely powerful in this. Don't ever get jaded. Don't ever get tired and think you'll never win, because you are the ones who are in charge of the politicians. You're the ones who can swing elections. You're the ones they fear. And that consumers should always consider themselves the most powerful people, and that we're on the side of the angels. And like you said, I'm the same as you. I've faith that in the end, good will win over bad, as it always does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tim. And thank you, viewers, for watching another episode of our Across the Pond podcast. You can see other videos on our YouTube page. You can also go check out some of our panels from Good Cop, and you'll see Tim and Martin there. So thanks again for joining us.